Hello, everyone, and welcome to Worlds Cooldown, presented by State Farm, your one-stop wrap-up for all things Worlds. We have concluded the quarterfinals with G2 qualifying through in 3-0 dominant fashion. As always, I'm Dash, joined by Spawn, Mark Z, and today we're welcoming Wadid to the Cooldown. Thanks for joining us, my friend. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing great, and I'm also really good to see my old team is just ripping out Gen.G right now.
Yeah, I imagine you must have been in a bit of a tough spot here, representing the LCK as a commentator, but a former teammate to these G2 members. What was your impression of the series before coming in today? What were you expecting?
I mean, I was expecting at least 4 games, because like Gen.G, even though their recent performance is not that great, like they got some veteran players and they still have some experience to go through out the BO5s. But today, I mean, they were just worst team like ever I seen in like quarterfinals at Worlds, So I mean, it's really disappointing, and at the same time, like it's really good to see how G2 progressed the game really fast.
I love it. Coming in with some of the spice there. Mark, when we take a look at this bracket, of course, we already see the semifinals locked in, but I'm going to keep everyone focused here on the quarterfinal column for just the remainder of the evening. Many people pinpointed this Gen.G G2 Esports as one of the quarterfinals that was expected to be close, perhaps a 5-game series.
Yeah, like what Deed said, at least 4. It was going to be what people thought would be the highlight to watch. And, I think Fnatic stole the show a little bit with how close they were to upsetting one of the tournament favorites. And Gen.G just got slammed. I mean, like what Deed said, it was a little hard to watch at some parts in this series because G2 were just so clearly the better team.
Well, Spawn, let's start then where it felt like maybe it was closest. Game 1, this was, I think, a game that was close until it wasn't, as we like to say at times here in the League of Legends community. G2 starting it off, of course, with a win.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you have a look at this game, I mean, if you had told me that it was going to be flashes blown in the bottom lane, a couple of ganks coming down there, Clid getting protection on his Scuttle Crabs, I would have been like, okay, cool. This is a game plan as how Gen.G want to be able to play it. This is what we saw a little bit during the group stage. But I just think that Gen.G was surprised by the pace at which G2 were willing to play this game. Repeated attacks into the side lane and just like almost reckless abandon in being able to shut down the solo laners. And it looked like Rascal and BDD honestly had never played a game at this kind of pace before and repetitively got caught out. Yeah, this for me was a game that made it so clear that this was probably going to be a 3-0. As this went on, it felt more and more like, oh my god, G2 is just such a better team because everything went in their favor for Gen.G early. They had great objective control. I think they got the first 3 Drakes. I think they got both Rift Heralds. I think they took the first 2 turrets. And the Goldie was never more than 1,000. And then play after play after play, Gen.G just got picked apart by G2. G2 just made plays in side lanes. Everywhere Gen.G went, G2 went somewhere else on the map and just took control of that game through just being smarter and better players. And that's not a gap you can ever close again. Like you can't make someone dumber. You can adapt in draft. You can adapt to your like game plan and some of these things. But like the smarter team's always going to be the smarter team,
and that's why, Mark, you just made me dumber right there. That was.
I'm just saying, watching that game, you're like, this series is over. I felt like, oh my god, as I watched G2 just pull them apart. It wasn't like one big play. It was just play after play. They were the smarter team.
I want to get Wadid back in here.
Yeah, I mean, like, for example, maybe we can talk about the draft first. Like, when you pick up the blue side, like, everyone is talking about how OP is blue side right now at Worlds meta, but I think it comes strong when your jungler can use the advantage from the first pick. But they banned Graves themselves and first picked Lilia, and I don't think this is great approach when it comes to like their play style. They want to play for both sides. They want to have strong pressure from the mid jungle, but nothing was happening. I mean, that was happening in the early game, but yeah, I mean, as you said, G2 was just so much better in the team fight and skirmishes. And I mean, I think that's also coming from the draft as well.
I love that point with Deed because it was on the analyst desk there at the close of the day. We heard Yamato talking a little bit about how maybe Gen.G got locked into what, quote unquote, the meta at Worlds seems to ask you to do around sometimes AP junglers and a focus to the top lane. But that doesn't necessarily support Gen.G's ultimate win condition, Mark.
Yeah, and I think that the draft is a great point because that was like the one saving grace I think Gen.G fans might have been holding on to. It was like, okay, they got TF Camille. This is a great macro team. They have great split pushing, and you gave them 2 of the best split pushing champs in the meta. And
Rascal can play Camille. He's done it before. BDD can play TF, and so I think that was one of the areas that if you were going to hold on to any faith for what went wrong game one, you're like, okay, maybe we can blame the draft a little bit, but it really became apparent that was not the case.
I mean, from their spawn, what do you think? Mark said game one was enough for him to start to assume that 3-0 could be what we are expecting. Were you as far down that road of conclusion there after game one?
Yeah, unfortunately, so the one thing I held out hope on is that I talk about this all the time, like the ruler carry. And I was like, okay, they've put him on an early game AD carry. Sure, they got a little bit of a lane advantage, but he was never able to translate that because you're playing Kalista into a Camille as well as a Twisted Fate. So maybe if you get rid of the Kalista pick and you put him on a late game carry, this is a guy that's going to be able to light up Summoner's Rift. And I actually thought to myself when he was hovering Ezreal, I was like, this isn't a good Ezreal game. And, he swaps over to Ashe in game 2. And I was just, as soon as I saw how game 2 was starting to go, that was when I really lost hope. Because it was like BDD wasn't holding up in the side lane. He had some good team fights, but we knew that wasn't how the game was going to be played. And then the fact that Ruler wasn't able to assert his will over Perkz. And just credit to Perkz. I say this all the time. Every time Perkz goes up against the best AD carry in the world, he never gets blown out. He's always competitive. He's always right there. And for me, Ruler is the best AD carry in the world. And Perkz was completely fine against him today. And in certain areas, completely outperformed him as well.
Yeah, I mean, that was a really good point when it comes to LCK. The rotation is always thinking about the waves and side waves and those efficiency-wise, and I think that's really too much. Sometimes you just need to go mid and just go for ARAM. But they're just thinking about way too much about the side lane. And that was the worst part for Gen.G. I mean, they were never just group up mid and look for the fight actively. And G2 was the one who was just actively looking for the fight, even though they were behind from the early game. They didn't care because they're just playing the team game, and Gen.G wasn't.
Never have I had more hope for North America as a region than when Wadid said sometimes you just have to group up and go mid. There it is. Now, looking ahead towards that game 2 of the day, it started with a bang in the bot lane with Gen.G's life earning the State Farm assist of the day by turning around a gank with a clutch Zenith play, handing Ruler an early double kill. Spawn?
This was insane. This just proves how good Life and Ruler are together as a duo lane. This is a 2v3 turnaround outplay. Ruler's target prioritization afterwards as well was just spot on. And this is a guy that has I always call him an affliction warlock, right? His uptime and his DPS is just nuts. And his positioning is so damn good. And I would expect a lot of duo lanes here would probably run for a second too long and actually probably give up the 2 for nothing. Because they weren't willing to turn. But that to me is just as brilliant play from Life. Ruler's always right there with him and just really well played. But unfortunately, that wasn't anywhere near enough. When you go 2 for 1 bottom side, then you kill the top side, that's supposed to be the easy game, but it just never happened that way.
I mean, so then where did it all fall apart? Let's start talking about it, because with such an early advantage, and again, what we talked about in expectation between these two teams is, as we watch it through one more time, just to fully materialize or understand how this game started. I mean, how does it all go bad from here?
I think a lot of it comes down to just skirmishing. There were a number of times where the side of Gen.G couldn't compete. Klid's Nidalee was not looking too hot. There was a chase down the top side sequence, which ended up in a 2v2, and BDD and Klid just got outplayed by Caps. Caps was an absolute monster this game. He put in such a incredible performance on a Sylas, and then you see these skirmishes, these dives that are pretty scrappy and could go either way. G2 are always outperformed. They're one of the best skirmishing teams in the entire world.
Yeah, and that's what, when we talk about G2, we talk about being comfortable in the chaos, right? This is a team that just loves the ability to be able to, not degrade, because that's the wrong way to put it, but they bring the game down a certain level and they just start fighting you and chipping away at that armor. And I think that this was a game that, the LCK representative in Gen.G tried to do what Wadid wanted them to do. They tried to fight back, but you could just see how comfortable, especially with this specific composition, G2 was for taking those small skirmishes that Mark was talking about.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, that game was just so easy because you got the bot pressure, and enemy mid lane is just simply mid lane champion. And if you have bot pressure with that, I mean, you can just simply close out the mid lane, You can just disable enemy mid lane, but they didn't do anything around their advantages from the early game. So, I mean, that was so questionable plays from the Gen.G side, and it was always G2 who fights first and looking for the fight, even though they were behind. So
Yeah, I completely agree with Wadid. And kind of the game for this came down to the Twist of Fate's first 2 moves. And we talk about TF having like the free move with the Destiny. And what happened is he teleported top lane, but they traded 1 for 1. And then he went bottom lane with these first... So he teleported top, then went Destiny bottom lane, once again traded 1 for 1. Meanwhile, Caps was just sitting mid lane farming. And then on Caps' first move, instantly 2 for nothing bottom lane, 3 plates down onto the turret. And as soon as that happens, when you're playing the melee into the TF, you just have an advantage for pretty much the rest of the game. TF can never catch up from there. That's why we talk about the Destiny being so important. You know, it goes on the longest cooldown out of like many ultimates in the game. And Caps just shows that patience. I mean, this is what we used to credit people for, like Rookie for doing. You can get multiple roams up on this guy, but he's going to slowly build his leave, and then his one roam is just going to be more impactful from you. And Caps this game just took over and was an absolute machine.
I also want to give some credit to G2's draft. You know, there were the takeaways by Gen.G in this game, and G2 found counters that didn't have to come through mid lane in terms of, oh, we took Galio or something to try and match that global. You know, the Sheng was a fantastic counter pick for dealing with both the TF and the Camille, and then having the Tahm Kench as well to be able to match these globals. You know, as soon as you lose control of mid lane, your Jin's going to get there a lot faster in these situations into side lane plays, if you ever did go for them, which Gen.G couldn't find after those first couple moves.
Do you know what really annoyed me about the TK as well, Mark? Do you know who hovered the TK? Gen.G. They like showed him the counter pick. Like, I hate it when my team used to do this. Like, why show them the counter pick? Like, if you like, Ashe Tahm Kench would have been a great lane to play into both Shen and Silas. Like, so either take it or just don't hover the damn champion, because I know it's a little thing, but like sometimes you just.
You think Grabs forgot?
Like, well, sometimes genuinely you do. Sometimes as a coach, I've been standing on stage there and like I've just seen someone flick past something and I'm like, well, yeah, wow, that champion does exist. It fits our comms beautifully right now. But Life hovered it for so long in that draft. They knew that this was going to be a game that came down to the globals, and I was so frustrated when Gen.G didn't pick it up that game.
Yeah, maybe that's from the mentality as well, because like at game 1, you couldn't do anything because you couldn't make the play. And even though you have such a great tools like Ashe ulti and Camille and TF, you feel like you're still like not comfortable with the engages and looking for the fight. So maybe that's why they picked up the Leona, but I completely agree with that. Like just picking TK up is just way better when it comes to like laning phase and mid game rotation as well.
I think in a lot of ways, these first 2 games of the series had aspects of a series that we expected to see. Of course, as we mentioned, you know, some of the drafting and Gen.G's ability to establish leads, but the follow through, and I think you hit the nail on the head in some cases, Spawn, where the pace of G2 has just caught some teams by surprise. But Wadid, before we head to break, I want to get some final thoughts from you, as we'll be subbing you out for Azael to help us break down the rest of the day. So first, on Gen.G and the remainder of the series, just a general thoughts here before we say goodbye to that team.
Oh, well, I think they had the strong part. You know, when you think about the Gen.G, okay, you play on the ruler and just don't mess up plays like around the top side. But yeah, I mean, they got the advantage, but they couldn't. I don't know, like they were just so good at it, but just completely lost, it seems like, today. So maybe the mentality wise, they were pretty weak. And that was the point that I was pointing out before the game. And yeah, I mean, I'm expecting more about G2 versus Damwon right now. And I think it can be the best series in Worlds 2020 right now.
Well, you just went where I want to go. You just said it might be the best series. I think that's a lot of what people are thinking right now. Do you have any inklings about, you know, what might dictate that series, either a prediction or a lane you want to focus on? Who's going to make or break it for either team?
I mean, I just want to have a full game, like full game 5s, you know, and I strongly think that Damwon and G2 is having similar playstyle as well, you know, like they have no losing point for their teams. So I think it can be really spicy, but I think, you know, like this time around, it can be LCK's year. So even though G2 is really strong, I think it's just time to LCK to shine again and just looking for the LCK dynasty. Yeah.
Yeah, looking to bring it back home to Korea. Both of these teams smashing through their quarterfinals are now paired against each other in what will be an epic semifinal for next Saturday. Wadid, again, thank you so much for joining us tonight on the Cooldown. It was great to have you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
We're going to step away. On the other side, Azael is going to join us to finish up our review of the series, and we've got more Worlds Cooldown after this. Welcome back to Worlds Cooldown, presented by State Farm. We're welcoming Azael to the show to help us break down the final game of that 3-0 and to look ahead, of course, to the 2 epic semifinals that we have ahead of us. Before we get to that game 3, Azael, I did want to give you a moment to talk about the first 2 games if we left anything unsaid in the previous segment of Cooldown.
I mean, I agreed with a lot of what you guys were saying. You know, I was honestly really disappointed with the showing that Gen.G had because it wasn't to me even like just one thing. It wasn't drafting. It wasn't necessarily team fighting. It felt like everything was kind of just going awry for them. You know, there was so many times where, you know, people just almost were looking like tilted. You know, we have Rascal like dying for towers in side lanes against TF. We have Gen.G hard engaging against a Shen comp, not taking into consideration the ultimate whatsoever. We have, you know, all kinds of stuff that just really looked completely uncoordinated. Even in game 1, you know, they have this massive lead, 3 dragons, and then when they finally do try to engage for a fight, they're throwing in their support with 3 of their members not even in range, and he's dying before, you know, the Terek ultimate even goes off. It was just
support life, baby.
Like what is this team that I'm watching? Like, this is not the this is not the Gen.G that I was expecting. I was expecting it to be competitive, and a lot of that is, you know, credit is due for G2 for pushing them and forcing these mistakes. Like, G2 played great, but I think, you know, independently of that, Gen.G also played a very poor series.
All righty. Well, that brings us to Game 3. Thank you for that fantastic summary. Game 3, G2, they do what Fnatic couldn't in this regard, and they lock it up in the 3-0 fashion, not giving Gen.G a single moment to breathe.
I mean, this game, it was probably technically, in some sense, the closest. Like, there was that Baron situation that Gen.G ended up winning, but it still felt like G2 were going to dominate this game the entire way through. I never had a time where I really thought they were going to lose it, and they were just so clear. Like, watch how many people flash into Wonder here. 3 separate people flashed the wall directly into Wonder. Like, this is how much better G2 was at these skirmishes and team fights that they kept getting into. Clid had a pretty disastrous game this time around on the Kindred. Felt pretty ineffective, and it was another game where Cap's absolutely popping off. Wonder's great on the Renekton, and I mean, it's a complete team for G2. They are one of these teams that is greater than the sum of their parts in a lot of ways, and their parts are great too, and that's why they're such an unbelievable team.
That helps.
Yeah, it certainly does. I mean, when you have a look at this game, though, I think at least there was something of the old Gen.G in there. Like, you have a look at like how well Ruler is positioning in these team fights. You look at the fact that they are able to launch some good coordinated counterattacks. Like, this time around, it's them with the global advantage, and they were able to utilize that to at least get into some winning positions. As you mentioned, Mark, they even grab a Baron in this game. But when you leave your shot that late, like, there's just a feeling of inevitability. And, like, if you're feeling it as viewers, imagine what the team that is representing, like, one of the proudest regions ever with former world champions down 0-2 is feeling. Like, they are so nervous, and you just know, like, you fall behind. Like, they are starting to sweat. And even when they had a little bit of control, you could tell that G2 was just, like, the game was being played the way they wanted to be played, and they were just running over the top of them.
And Mark, in reference to your point about each member of G2 being stellar in their own right, it was Perkz in this game that proved that every second counts with an incredible quick Silver Sash activization made possible, of course, by the Cisco network.
This was honestly so fast.
He doesn't stop moving. He's literally still in motion.
Perkz, baby, let's go. Those are really, really impressive to me, and it's kind of reminiscent to me of some of, you'll see supports through the Self Mikhails where there's that tiny window where you can essentially immune it, and this was basically that. Like, that was not a quick QSS, that was, he never got CC'd. It was so good.
Legitimately, I wonder if there was even a frame where he was not moving. It doesn't feel like it.
I didn't see any animation, like, stutter or reset or anything. It just kept moving. The arms just kept pumping as he ran away.
There it is. There it is. It was gorgeous. I mean, in all reality. But I think when we take a look back at the series as a whole, there is, of course, one member that stands out to me above all else, and that has to be Caps there in the mid lane.
Yeah, I completely agree. When you have a look at Caps now and the journey that he's been on, right, this is a guy that is starting to rise the occasion. I mean, you know, he's the greatest Western player, I think, at this stage. And then when you have a look at how he is starting to dominate these games on the big stage, he has genuine 1v9 performances. And as Mark said, that's really hard to do when you're playing with 4 really great players. And, you know, he makes counter picks work, he makes line picks work.
And I think in this series, what he showed is his pressure that he puts on the map. Like, I just wish I could see like the percentage of plays he takes versus the percentage of plays that actually work. Because it feels like when he commits to something, it like pays off 9 times out of 10 at the moment. And I think that's really difficult to do in a roam heavy mid lane. A lot of the time you just feel like you're like kind of ebbing and flowing over the map and not really getting all that much done. But this guy gets it done every single time.
And I know you were really positive there, but I'm just gotta contest one thing that you're saying. You know, he's starting to get it done. He's made 2 World Finals. He won MSI. You know, he has been getting it done for years now. Honestly, like he has been dominating. He's been so consistently successful at international events for years now. Like he's just always good. Yes, people, you know, if you want to be a detractor, will point towards him against Rookie. You know, some of those types of lanes that didn't go as well. But it's like that's one guy in the world that maybe he hasn't had as good laning stats against. Everyone else, it feels like he is being incredibly successful against. He has done well against SKT, has done well against Storm1, you know, did incredible against BDD here. He wipes the floor with most of the other Western mid laners. Like this guy just is top tier and has been for years. And I think there's not really any argument to be made that he is not one of the best in the world, period. Not just like really good for a Western mid laner or, oh, he's the best European. Like he's just one of the best, period, right? And that's the end of the sentence. He really does deserve, I think, to be talked about, you know, at this point amongst the greats.
Yeah, I think that's interesting because, like, in hindsight, right, when you start like weighing the accolades up, which we don't often do, like you do have to start removing the Western bit, and maybe like even saying like, you know, the best Western player is a little bit disrespectful for how well he's been globally at the moment. And I do completely agree. Like people will point back to that one or a couple of series, right, in reality against Rookie when they were playing like mirror sides of the matchup, the Aurelias into the Syndras and stuff like that, and the Akali at that point when she was just reworked, and they use that as the glaring factor. But reality was he was a much younger player than Rookie was in that part of his career. And I think the Caps that we see play now, the Caps we see play now would definitely stand up a little bit better, I think, than like what the Caps did back then. So yeah, I'm definitely ready to start putting him in that conversation as well. I think that's a really great point, Azale.
Yeah, I mean, I think Rookie legitimately is just the best laning mid laner in the entire world, but that does not exclude Caps from being in the discussion of the best mid laner in the world because it's more than just laning, right? You know, Rookie is incredible, and, you know, I don't know if I'm ready to make that assertion, but Caps, you're just talking about how consistently he's roaming, how consistently he's making plays and putting pressure on the map and exerting his will on the map. He has a damn good laning phase too, but that is not, you know, the keystone of this player's game. I would say it is for Rookie. Rookie has a lot going for him outside of that, of course, but I think it's worth having that discussion, and I think it's really a cool one to talk about.
And I'll just say this is an argument I'm happy to be able to have, that we have a player in the Western Hemisphere stepping up and making it a conversation to this degree. Now, despite the dominating performance from Caps across the entire series, it was Perkz who opened up on Jin to lead G2 in their Game 3 drive to victory, brought to you, of course, by Mercedes-Benz.
Yeah,
huge step up. I was going to say, this is a huge step up performance for Perkz, I think, because he had been, I think, criticized a little bit coming into the tournament, and he has held up extremely well as they get deeper and deeper in. He is becoming a huge force for them. He's incredible in team fights and is able to play without a lot of the resources that some other bot laners get.
I mean, this was a... Go ahead, Spawn.
I really love this 2.5 delay for me versus everyone else, by the way. Yeah, no, absolutely, I agree. And I think that the thing about Perkz is it's so easy to criticize him because, once again, this is a guy that was in the conversation as like such a legendary player. So when he performs average, like people are pretty quick from what I've seen so far at this World Championship to like call out like the statement. But I just think if you have a look at the year this guy's had, you have a look at how important he is for this team. And I said it kind of when Wood did was on the show. He constantly plays against the best bottom lanes in the world with Mickey. And Mickey's a terrific player, but he never gets gapped. Like, I just cannot remember watching a tournament where I'm like, wow, this guy has been constantly destroyed in the laning phase. Like, he always stands up. He always fulfills his role. And, you know, at the moment, I think that he's getting back to that kind of legendary status where he had a couple of games tonight where the game's revolving around bottom lane. And they're taking it to Ruler, like a guy that I obviously respect a lot. So I just think that, you know, he gets... I think people like to criticize Perkz for his greatness. And sure, Perkz has a lot of defenders out there because a lot of people love him. But I just think he's nearly a player that is like not above criticism, but like it's just I don't see the criticism ever really sticking because he's so consistently good.
Well, I think this is an important conversation to have because it was just in the group stage that people were raising concerns for G2 based on the way, the fact that more and more of the games seem to have been determined by bot lane focus and saying, hey, this hasn't been as big of a standout year for him as in previous, and particularly with some of the AD carries that are, top tier in the meta, there was concern, Azael, but very much in this series has he stepped up.
Yeah, I mean, he looked very, very good today. I think part of the reason that we had those concerns, especially being brought up again this year, was in spring, he was their mid laner, right? And they had Caps playing bot lane. Then they swapped back. They actually didn't do very well in the regular season, including a lot of losses where I think he just didn't look as comfortable, and there was a lot of discussion around the fact that when he had shined in the past, it was always on these crit marksmen who could make aggressive plays, the Kaisas, the Zayas, who almost felt like they fit more into how a mid laner could play a fight, where you see the angle and you make it happen, right? And like Senna is just not that. Ashe is just not that for the most part. So I think that is where those discussions did kind of come up. And I think that, to your point, he's answering a lot of those questions that, hey, maybe it took him a little bit of time, but he wasn't playing the role in spring, and he's been able to rise to the occasion here and play really, really well, even on those champions at Worlds.
Now, here at Worlds 2020, MasterCard is still tracking the CS champions, and G2's Wonder is still atop the table. Last week, we thought this series might deliver a new winner, since we expected it to be a little bit closer, perhaps going 5 games, and even at times going into the late game. But these games, much faster than expected, so that 441 still very much in the lead.
Yeah, unfortunately, whilst the members of G2 were farming quite well today, if the games are going for between 28 and 32 minutes, you just not get to 441 CS. So Wonder going to sit up there for one more day. Ruler, unfortunately, not going to get a chance to be able to climb back up there. But I do have hope that some of these games later on in the tournaments will be quite long and will be bangers.
I'm interested because I feel like most of the series have either been 3-0s that are pretty dominant and the games are ending before you can hit these numbers, or they're close and people are scrappy as hell. And the CS is getting left by the wayside.
That's true.
In that top esports Fnatic series, it wasn't uncommon to see heading into the 10 minutes, people at 60 CS, which is pretty low for, best teams in the world, but you have to remember that they're fighting all the time. So if that pace of game keeps up, it might actually be hard to see people break in and change up that leaderboard.
Oh man, what a conundrum. Do we want more fights and less CS, or do we want to do I don't know. I think we want more fights. I think we want more fights. I'm happy to give Wonder that. Wonder, take the award. Take the award. Give us more fights. I want to see
so
scrappy
beautiful,
games.
the CS thing.
All right, MasterCard will, of course, be rewarding viewers with drops when the minion champion is dethroned. So if you're a viewer, perhaps you are screaming for one of those long bangers. So be sure to keep watching at watch.lollysports.com for a chance at some free loot. We, of course, have to talk a little bit more about Gen.G as they depart Worlds 2020. I'm coming to you, Azael, first on this one. Again, I think a little bit of a sour taste in some people's mouth in seeing them exit in this fashion. But how did you feel about their Worlds run overall?
I mean, I think overall, they did fairly well. The tough part is you got decimated in your quarterfinals, so a lot of the good things that you did in group stage will now be kind of unwritten, right? People are already kind of talking about their group as the team that had the weakest teams, or at least didn't have the teams that are at the very top. We also have to remember though that Fnatic pushed top to the very edge, right? And they did best Fnatic in their group. I do think that they are deserving of credit for that. At the end of the day, I think they played below their level, and G2 played incredibly well here today, and that kind of just amalgamated in what was a smash.
Yeah, I think Reckless had in his interview during the press conference said no one's going to remember that what happened in this loss really, and I think that's not quite true. I think people do remember a lot of times the really great performances even in losses. Like Hilly and Reckless will be remembered. Gen.G, I think this is why it feels really bad for them, is there's nothing to remember here. It was utter domination through 3 games. Like Azael's saying, their group stage stuff will largely be forgotten under best of ones and these other kinds of things that people tend to not remember group stage domination. So yeah, I think this is a really feels bad, man, moment for them compared to other people who are going out in group stage even. It's everyone wants to go further in the tournament, and as a competitor, you rarely take consolation prizes, but they don't even get that this time around.
Yeah, and to just go a level deeper, right? This is a team that has multiple players that are X-Factor players. BDD is legendary on his ability to be able to turn team fights with big control mage ultimates, like his Azir walls and things like that. Ruler is like uptime DPS, really great as an AD carry, and we saw what Clid's already been able to do on the international stage. And kind of to echo Mark's point, where was that in this series? Where was one of their players taking the game by the scruff of the neck and saying, you know what, like, I'm going to drag us over the line like once. This one's on me, boys. And it just felt like they got suffocated today by the way G2 played the game. And to me, that's like even scarier, like now when you look at G2, because it's like if they can like kind of handle a team like Gen.G that easily. Like it didn't look like they were breaking sweats at a point, and it looked like when Gen.G were launching counterattacks, G2 were kind of like laughing them off. Like, you know, Caps is just roaming in on a Silas afterwards, chucking Leona ults at people and picking up triple kills and like just erasing what was a really great team fight from Gen.G. So yeah, they would be very disappointed in this, and I feel like this is a best of 5 where individuals will look at it and be like, I needed to do more to allow my team to get up, and they're best of 5s that really sting as individuals.
Well, there you have it. Finally, it is time for us to hear from G2 themselves on this series. Laura caught up with Caps to talk about their quarterfinals win.
And thank you very much, Dash. Laura here, back in the interview studio here in Berlin, and I have Caps with me to talk about the amazing victory of G2 Esports, who advanced to semifinals. And you guys are the only Western teams who have made it. So first off, congratulations on that. It looked rather one-sided and easy, actually, from you. So I don't feel like Gen.G changed a lot from the LCK, and we know that they play a lot around Ruler. But is there anything else you learned about the team from group stage that helped you win today?
I think a lot of what they did kind of went as expected. They drafted I feel like every game we kind of outscaled them. First game was very tough early on, but when we managed to survive and we managed to like deny them one Drake, which would give them Drake's hold, then suddenly it turned completely in our favor. So it was kind of what we expected, that we would probably outscale them, but we would have to like get through early game. And we managed to do that all games, even if game 1 was like a bit sketchy.
I gotta say, there's still a huge difference between G2 in best of 1s and G2 in best of 5s. How do you explain that?
I mean, best of 1s are just like, there's a lot of variance, right? I mean, you play a lot of, like, for example, one day we played 3 games in a row against different teams, so we can't be prepared for everyone. For example, the last day when we ended up losing the tiebreaker, most of our preparation went into TL and Machi, because obviously if we win against them, we're confirmed out of groups, and then we're not really scared of any team. So first and second scene didn't matter as much as just like making out of groups. So we really prepared for them. And then when it came to Suning, obviously we still want to win. Getting first seed is usually better than second seed, but it didn't work out in the end.
Now, talking about G2 as a whole, when we think about the year you had in the LEC, you had a hardest year, I want to say, than 2019, but you come off strong here in World Championship. So how strong do you feel right now?
I mean, I think like everyone says this always, but I feel like we can take down every team, right, if we play well. Obviously, we can also lose, but we're definitely catching up a lot. I mean, I talked before about like the fact that going to Worlds, I think Europe was really, really behind every other region. We were getting completely smashed every scrim. We would lose 0-6 to everyone. But throughout the weeks, we have improved a lot. And every week we were getting better. And now I feel like we're at the point where we can actually challenge the top teams. And then next week, I hope we're at the point where we can just like beat the top teams on like a consistent basis. So it's just been a crazy feeling, because we were just actually so behind going into Worlds. Like we just played a completely different game. But now we caught up. We play like a lot better around Jankos. Like Jankos was super far ahead every single game today. So yeah, he could just pop off.
And you will get the rematch against Damwon. Now, I know that all the Damwon players are ready for you, and they actually want to take their revenge on you. So how do you expect this one to go? And how do we take down Damwon? I feel like we didn't see any weaknesses from the team so far. Do you agree?
Damwon definitely looks strong. I think I mean, for me, like they've always looked strong. I mean, even last year they were doing really well against us in scrims, and they were also doing really well, just like at Worlds in general, right, and LCK. Obviously, this year they like stepped it up one bit, but at the same time, it's nothing that we haven't faced before. We played them last year on stage, and at the end of the day, they just played worse, I think, on stage, and I think we played better on stage. So it's kind of a good match like that, I guess. And obviously, this next week will be a completely different year, different meta. But I believe we can do it. and hopefully we can make it all the way to the final again.
All right, I will trust you on this as the last Western hope here in World Championship. But Caps, thank you so much for the interview. Congrats on winning this one again, and we'll see you next week. And back to you, Dash.
All right.
Thank you very much, Laura. I love hearing from Caps. I actually really appreciate the perspective, actually, that he gives back on the group stages and kind of their approach as a team to qualifying through, saying that coming into that final day of play, their target was on the two teams that they expected to beat but needed to beat to guarantee themselves out, as opposed to focusing on perhaps the tougher matchup against Suning.
Yeah, I think that's super interesting because, you know, once you get through groups, a lot of groups is forgotten. As we're talking about Gen.G, no one's going to remember they were number one in their group. They lost 3-0 here. So in that regard, I think, you know, the deeper G2 goes in the tournament, less people will not care that Suning took them down. Or if Suning continues to push far, then it's like, hey, that was Group A, might have been the low-key, the best group in the tournament. So, you know, I think it was really interesting to hear that, you know, Suning might have had an advantage in that series based off the prep levels.
Absolutely. Now, to close out our discussion on this series, I want to jump into our World's Honors, where we give a Feels Good award to those that deserve it, rather. And Spawn, we're going to start with you today.
Yeah, and I'm going to look straight away to the top lane, because I think a lot of this series was played away from that area of the map, but Wonder, every single time I just looked up there, was just getting work done. And this is a guy that, you know, you put him in advantageous positions and he's going to be able to get away with clean advantages, and then you're trying to dive him and he's taking like 1-for-1s in a 1v3 situation. And every single time I watch Wonder play the game, it's all the little things he does. Like, he's always farming safely on his side lane. He rarely gets caught out on the split push. Then to Azael's point, when people are over-capitalizing on his wave, he catches them out very quickly, especially with the use of Caps' pressure. And this is a player that I think that is just absolutely brilliant in his approach to the game, plays multiple styles, and is just such a threat, honestly. And to have top laners from the West that are actually good is just such a great thing to watch, because it's been an area that the Eastern teams have just had over Europe and North America for so long. And to see Wonder like just continually pushing and being that player is really fun to watch.
Some might say he's the best WoW player to ever have touched the game of League of Legends. Mark Z, what about you? What do you think?
I'm not going to dignify that one.
I'll give you a moment if you need it now. I'm gonna honor Caps. I mean, it's the easy one. I rushed in as soon as, you know, I think I said middle of game too. I was like, I'd like to honor Caps today. He's such a monster. And, you know, we talk about how G2 is the sum greater than the sum of all their parts. I mean, it's still worth acknowledging that this is the best Western player of all time. That is the heart and soul of this team, I think, in a lot of ways, and really brought them from a really good team. You know, 2018 G2 was still able to make World Semifinals, and brought them to making finals of multiple international tournaments in a row now. And, you know, he is such an beast. He's had the best silence performance at Worlds so far. He had some of the best games of that today. Like, he's a treat to watch. He's an awesome person off the Rift as well. Like, he is such an incredible person, and I can't wait to see how G2 does in the rest of this tournament.
Absolute world-class performance to Azael. Azael, who are you going with?
For me, you know, I wanted to look over at Gen.G and give some respect to Ruler. I think that Ruler played an outstanding series, given the constraints he was dealing with his 4 teammates. You know, I think that they were not actually playing, you know, like, I don't even mean it as flame. I just think it's just straight up true that their counterparts all played better than them across the board, right? Like, is anyone willing to debate that?
Not me.
Think so.
Not me.
So it's one of those situations where it's like, it's just the fact of the matter, right? Like, Ruler played, I think, a very strong series. I think that often as a marksman, how you look is so dependent upon your team, right? When you are winning and when you are playing from ahead, it's so easy to just move through team fights and clean up kills and really look good. I think that he really was, you know, giving it his best in a losing effort. You know, we saw some brilliant moments from him. I think he was strong across all 3 games, but, you know, unfortunately for him, it wasn't enough at the end of the day.
Yeah, there are actually a number of individual moments within that third game on Ezreal where I was seeing those moments, you know, of brilliance as an AD carry from him, and just wondering what would happen if he had a little bit more support out in front of him. Now, with the quarterfinals complete, let's take another look at the bracket with an eye, of course, towards next week's semifinals. 2 matchups and 2 big ones. They're on the top side, of course, we've got Top Esports against Suning. This is a regional LPL matchup. And then on the bottom side, Damwon Gaming against G2 Esports. 2 teams that 3-0'd their way to the semifinals. And I think that's what is so interesting to me about the 2 sides of the bracket spot. On the top, you got 2 teams that at least dropped 1 game, if not 2, in their quarters. And on the bottom side, you got those blowouts.
Yeah, and I think that when people are looking at the top side of the bracket first, you know, top esports coming up against Suning, it would be so easy to be like, top esports dealt with this team, and this is supposedly a very one-sided matchup. But I think that that discounts the growth that Suning has been able to make lately, and the fact that top looked much more mortal coming into their quarterfinal than what they did when they were playing within the LPL. And I think that when I see this kind of series as a whole, I am really hopeful that top can just, Suning can continue that momentum train and actually get themselves to a world final, which would be so fun because I love the way they play League of Legends at the moment.
Zale?
Yeah, for me, like I still am more on the top side. You know, I think one of the things that we have to remember is that JDG, like, all 5 of their players, it was their first international event. And I do think that JDG played below the level that they showed in the LPL. I would also say that Zoom absolutely handled Bin in this series, despite the loss. And I think that if top is playing, you know, more comfortably, and I think having gotten past Fnatic, having avoided, you know, going down 2-0, they stayed calm, they were able to regroup and turn in 3 really strong games. I think that 369 is as good or better than Zoom personally. And I think that he also can really run over Bin. And we saw in the LPL playoffs that Bin did struggle against these elite top laners. He wasn't able to carry in the same ways. And the same thing happened when they did play JDG. I think that it could be the difference, though, in a stronger top.
I will say, though, that you saw a bit of a blueprint on how to take down top from Fnatic there about how much they could attack the bot lane. People were identifying Jackie Love and Yanja as potential, not necessarily weak point, because Jack Love's obviously a great player, but can lose and kind of get over aggressive or greedy, whatever you want to call it. Huangfeng dominated in that series. He was so incredible, and they have the pieces to kind of emulate some of that blue plan.
The blue plan.
Excuse me.
Everyone knows the blue plan.
It's the blue side plan. There's blue.
I'm going to keep going on. No, we're not stopping. That Fnatic put forward, and I think that they can do that. And as well as the fact that SOFM is incredible jungler, and you know, Bin is an incredible top lane. If 369 is not able to perform like he was domestically, then they're going to have a lot of trouble versus Suning. And I think this is a lot closer of a matchup than people would have thought a week ago when now these teams are matching up.
Okay, all I'm going to say is, how did Jackie Love look the last 3 games? Because I think he was very, very good, right?
So I think game 4, they still were getting clapped on.
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's just tough to rely on Jackie Love to underperform like in the same way. You know, he looked awful, I think, in those first games against Fnatic. Those were some of the worst games I think I've ever seen from him. He has been, you know, pretty stone cold for the most part in his career. So, you know, I think it's hard to depend upon that type of performance coming out to him. Like, if that's your win condition, is Jackie Love playing like he did against Fnatic? Oh, I wouldn't want to be in that position.
Yeah, and the thing about top that we have to continually go back to, because, like, sure, they had a couple of rough games at Worlds so far. 369 is considered, like, the best, if not second best top laner within the LPL. Karsa, for me, is, like, consistently one of the best junglers in the world. Like, this team is more than Jackie Love, right? So Jackie Love can have those crazy moments where he just randomly runs in and dies, but you got people like Karsa, and his Lee Sin games in particular were just absolutely spectacular to be able to watch. So, you know, I looked down the top esport, and I didn't get to the fact that they have the best mid laner in the world on their lineup as well. So you look down the top esports lineup, and you just think, you know what? They can afford to have a rough game here or there, because the other 4 players, they probably got a little bit of slack there for them.
Yeah, there are two big things for me here. Number one that I'm hearing is the importance of recognizing that top esports is not infallible, right? As a team, I think the expectation was pretty great for them coming into the tournament. They did not go undefeated in the group stages. For the first time, we didn't have that. Then we get to the quarterfinal. They do drop those 2 games in surprising fashion. They squeak through, but hey, they were challenged. And then back to your point, Mark, around the number of players on Suning that have stepped up and leveled up over the course of the Worlds tournament. We already hit one of them in Huangfeng. The other one, though, is Karsa's opponent in the jungle. SOFM has hit another level here on the World stage.
Yep, coming in, he was one of the people that a lot of people would say was up for best jungler in the world. It's starting to narrow that list a lot. He's still near the top of that, and I think he will be one of the big X factors in an upset win if Suning is able to pull it off.
The other big story point here is less of a contentious point, more of a story point. Karsa, Sword Art. I love seeing these 2 guys on the Rift, on the stage at the same time. There's so much history here.
Yeah, I mean, it's the Flash Wolves reunion, right? It's so cool actually to see these guys who have been around for so many years, and really were truly standout players through all those years, for their regions, for their teams, and to see them actually have all the pieces around them now to truly shine on the international stage. It is a team game. We already knew that they were amazing when they were on these worst squads, but like they now have some of the best players in the world surrounding them, and they can truly shine. They can truly show us how great they are as players.
And I mean, to combo a little bit back down to that bot lane point, we're talking a lot about Jackie Love, but it is a duo lane, and I mean, Sword Art versus Uyanja does feel like a bit of a mismatch based off their performances thus far at Worlds. Uyanja was criticized for some of the mistakes he was making in spring.
Bench game.
Yeah. I mean, it was a rough series for him. I think he set the record for most deaths pre-15 or something like that. So, I mean, that's another place that you have to keep your eye on when we start talking about this bot lane. Jackie Love is an incredible player, but if Sword Art can find better engages in lane phase and win some trades, it might not be about the 80 carries quite as much.
All right. Well, it's not like we really narrowed down to any one or two matchups that you got to keep your eyes on, but that's what I love about it. This is a semifinal that's going to demand you take a look at every lane and every matchup at some point during it. Moving on to the second semifinal that we've got coming up, a clash between the LCK's Damwon Gaming and the LEC's G2. And as we stated when looking at the bracket, both of these teams smashed through their quarterfinals in 3-0 fashion. But let's start with Damwon, the hope for the LCK, Spawn.
Yeah, and I think that you look how dominant this team was throughout the LCK and the final series in particular. Then you look at how dominant they've been through Worlds and the fact that they were able to pick up that 3-0. And honestly, we're talking about how G2 looked like they were having fun today. Well, honestly, Damwon didn't look like they were tested at all by DRX. They just had their, the run of the map from minute 1 in that series. So this is a team that I don't even, have they shown anything yet? Have we even seen them put the car into second gear yet? This is a team that is so damn scary on the world stage.
Azael?
Yeah, I mean, it was one of the least competitive, if not the least competitive quarterfinal I can ever remember. Yeah. And it was over the number 2 team from the LCK, right? So let's just put that out there. This wasn't like, oh, well, it was against ANX or whoever, right? This was against, a powerhouse region. And I do think that despite the fact that G2 really did handle Gen.G, I don't think that you can use that and then just say, all right, well, they beat one Korean team, so now they're going to beat the next one. They may be able to do it, but I do think that Damwon looks so heads and shoulders above the rest of their entire league. I actually felt that LCK got a fair bit weaker this year compared to previous years, but that was excluding Damwon, who truly is world class and people have had from the very beginning as a championship contender. And I think that of those 3 teams that people kind of put in that conversation, which was Gen.G, who are out top, who have, almost got knocked out. Damwon is the one that has kind of the unblemished record. They're the only one remaining that you don't really have much to say about them, just kind of knock them down a few pegs. So I do think that this is a much greater challenge for G2, and I still think it is heavily Damwon favored. I am hopeful for G2, but I would not be surprised to see Damwon just absolutely slap them down.
And there's a lot of history in this matchup, too. I mean, just going back to last year, the 3-1 in favor of G2 over Damwon, there's only one player different, and that was, Ghost coming in for Nuclear. But Damwon has been this upward trajectory over the course of their history. Back in 2018, they were kind of the under the radar, but everyone knew how great they were behind the scenes in the scrim culture. Then they were super hyped up coming to that Worlds, a little bit of a flop. Now they're hands down undisputed best team in Korea, and they're starting to deliver on that. And now they get to go up against G2, who kind of started that arc a couple years earlier of just kind of being on this slow, steady upward swing to making back-to-back international finals. So I am really excited to see them go back at it. And Naguri was one of those people who was super criticized at that previous Worlds, who is dominating now at this one.
Spawn, I want to come to you, but I just want to call out here while the graphic is still up. 6 solo kills for Naguri over 9 games. The dude's only played 9 games at Worlds, and he's got 6 solo kills.
And that's what I was going to say. The good news for G2 is your top side on the map is playing insane at the moment. The bad news for G2 is Damwon probably have the best top side ever. And I say that because all 3 of their players on the top side of the map are probably
top 2 in their role at the moment. Like Noguri is definitely in the conversation for top lane. Canyon at the moment, if he isn't the best jungle at the tournament, because the only person that people kept throwing around was Kanavi. And Kanavi's Dart award worthy at the moment, right? So Canyon at the moment definitely has to be the best jungler for mine. And then Showmaker versus Caps is maybe the most excited I've been for a mid lane matchup in a very long time. So like short G2 are playing well in that area of the map, but I just think that these players on the top side of Summoner's Rift for Damwon Gaming are special beyond belief.
Azale, let's talk a little bit more about this mid lane matchup, particularly with tonight's series, affecting that conversation. I think this has to be the featured matchup.
I would agree. I mean, I think that if there is a way to beat Damwon, it is for Caps to play a style that Damwon is not prepared for, right? When we saw that Damwon was playing against DRX basically played the same game as Damwon, just worse, and that is why I think it looked so dominant. It never felt like there was any challenge for them at all. Caps will not play like Showmaker. Caps will play like Caps, and I think that is one of the beautiful things about G2 and one of the beautiful things about this player is that he is going to play his game. He is going to take risks. He is going to challenge you and force you to react to each and everything he does the entire game and even the entire series. And if you're not up to that, if you're not playing at his pace, you will fall behind and you will lose.
Yeah, I think the clash of styles is such an interesting point. Just like, Damwon's willing to grind you out. If you're not going to, force a fight against them, they will happily take CS leads, jungle advantages, vision advantages, and objectives. G2 doesn't play that way at all. Just the pace of the game between these two is night and day. Combined kills per minute was totally different. And so I'm excited to see what happens to Damwon when someone punches back finally and really hits them in the mouth. And you're not playing this clean game with all your waves set up like Wadid was talking about, at the top of the show. G2 will play scrappy. They'll play dirty. And I want to see Damwon and how they're able to react to that.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that what impresses me about Damwon is their approach to objectives and how their flankers are always deep on flanks because they always do get that wave control that Mark is talking about. But the easiest way to attack that is in the setup. And if G2 continue to play these like tempo cheat champions like the Tahm Kench, the Twisted Fate, the Shen, then you have the ability to attack that setup very well. And that's what G2 excels at. They are hands down the best team that we've seen in the last couple of years of accelerating the pace of the game when you're trying to find setup and trying to find these windows. And that's what makes this stylistically like a pretty good matchup for G2, I think. Like that's what makes me excited and give them hope for this best of 5.
And I think it goes back to what Wadid was talking about earlier, where he was talking about the LCK teams are always prioritizing the perfect setup, right? Whereas G2 is just grouping and fighting you. They're the ones starting the fight, even if they're behind, where, we saw Gen.G tonight trying to make sure, all right, wave's got to be pushed out, then we set up the vision, oh, G2's already killing us, right? And it's that kind of thing where they don't always check all the boxes. They don't always have the perfect setup with every wave bouncing at the tower, and then they move, and then they look for the TP flank. Sometimes they go for the imperfect play because they see an opportunity. They see a window to force something where they're going to get more from killing you than they will lose for not having those minions set up.
Sometimes you just got to group mid and fight. I don't think it could be said better than that, and that's what Wadid said earlier tonight. Well, either way, we are guaranteed to have one LPL team into the finals. It's going to be either Top Esports or Suning as they battle it out. And then, of course, the winner of that match will await the winner of G2 versus Damwon Gaming. That's going to do it for us here, though, tonight and the end of the quarterfinals. So for myself, the casters, and the remote broadcast crews from all around the world, thank you for watching, and enjoy a look back at the quarterfinals with our Axe highlights. We'll see you next week for more Worlds.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the caster desk for Worlds 2020. It's the beginning of the knockout stage. I'm Atlas, and I am joined by LS to take you through a rematch of the LCK Summer Final.
A little bit of an adventure. Here comes Pioshik, though.
Yeah, Dogger's gonna flash in. Massive slicing Maelstrom into the backline. The Lulu dies immediately. Doran gonna go down as well. Okay, Arrow is going to connect here as Chovy tried to disintegrate someone off to the side, but Pioshik is the one in trouble. Goes not a lot of mana, but he's got arrows, and he will be able to take them down. It is going to be Chovy falling as well. Damwon looking absolutely unstoppable in this first quarterfinal. 3-0, as many predicted. Are you ready for some LPL bloodbath?
Oh yeah, I am so ready for this.
Ben trying to change this up, but where does that? What? He's in the base! Behind the curtains with the curtain call! Everybody is done, man. Huanfeng is legendary with the Drake, down nearly now to 0 HP. It's gonna be slain by Huanfeng. If the man didn't already do enough this series, he just got the Ocean Soul for his team. Loken is down, Huanfeng's on a rampage, and boy is he not stopping. Suning will take down their opponents from the LPL. The third seed will defeat the second, and they will move on to the semifinals.
Is Fnatic taking on Top Esports. This is an uphill battle from the get-go. And 369 is down. The battle star comes out. Won't engage. That's the engage. Jackie Love teleported back in. Has been rooted in place. Locked down. The damage is following up, but he cannot stay alive. Fnatic will turn their attention to the Nexus. Fnatic strike first against Top Esports. The engage, the slam dunk, showstopper. Fnatic want to make it to semi-finals, and they'll take down 369. They'll start hunting Ianja. The blast cone is available. Hop forward. Karsa gets self-made. Jungler on jungler action.
As Fnatic are winning these fights, Karsa is going absolute god mode, trying to pull this game back for Top.
This is the focus. The Nexus is being destroyed, and Fnatic won the first two, lost the next, and Top Esports will force a game 5.
Karsa entered god mode.
Jackie escapes, sidesteps everything, it does not go down. The Dawning Shadow will not find the kill either, and now Himaseng is going to be the next target. How did Jackie Love dodge everything? The Red Bull Baron power play up to 3,000. That's the engage, but there's not enough damage following it up. Teleports coming in, Selfmade was not there. 1, 2, 3 members of Fnatic are down. The catch onto Reckless Knight, and the rest of Top Esports have done it again. Top Esports, for the first time, will pull off reverse sweep.